Hello and welcome to We Stand Wednesday, a space to elevate nonprofits who are doing community development work here in our Oklahoma community. Today, our very special guest is Cindy Nguyen, and I will let her introduce herself in just a moment. I am your host, Representative Chelsea Branham, and I am excited for us to be working on this series. Cindy is a longtime cohort of mine. We did some great work together and she's continuing that work. So Cindy, tell us a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the questions.
Thank you for that introduction, Chelsea. So I currently work at the YWCA in Oklahoma City, and I am responsible for all of our equity and inclusion trainings. So I train our staff to be more equitable, be more a little bit inclusive, especially when it comes to victim services and providing services for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And then I go to other organizations and I offer them all kinds of trainings depending on what they want. And then I also created the Asian Roundtable in Oklahoma.
Well, that is super great work. And I am very, very excited about the roundtable, especially. So I appreciate everything that you're doing there and makes me so proud to see all the things that are going on. So, all right, we're going to jump into the questions here. So the first one is, what is the value that drives you to do this work?
Honestly, it's probably who else has been doing the work, especially for Asian women in Oklahoma. So the reason that I created the Asian Task Force for Domestic and Sexual Violence for Asian women is because I saw nobody else do it. And I would much rather provide support for already existing organizations because I'm a strong believer that if the organization already exists, they probably just need money and resources that maybe I can provide, but I did not see that in Oklahoma. So I was kind of like, let me create one because nobody else is doing the work. So I gathered a team of what I like to call the Avengers, amazing Asian women in Oklahoma who are ready to do anything and everything to be able to provide inclusive services for women in Oklahoma.
Well, that is outstanding work. I know that in advocacy, it's really difficult to sometimes find providers for the different Asian communities. We have a really robust population of Vietnamese very close to where you provide services. We have the second highest population of Burmese people outside of Burma. There's huge pockets of diversity here, and I'm so glad that you are pulling people together to serve all of those people and get them the services that they need.
Well, you got to do what you got to do to provide services for our community. And I came in as the only Asian American advocate at the Y currently. Hopefully that changes soon. But I often saw people who looked like me and they weren't, it was no malintention or anything like that, but they weren't getting the services that they needed. All kinds of barriers, such as language barriers, cultural barriers. A lot of our population is made up of immigrants and refugees, and a lot of that ties into being able to access resources for domestic and sexual violence. So we created it just because we wanted to not only have them walk in the door and see someone that looks like them and understands them, but we also wanted to be able to provide them services in their own language with culturally conscious and competent advocates.
Absolutely. All right, so what systems or policies reinforce this and or create this problem? You kind of touched on a little bit of it, but give me like a systems institutional view of what you're up against.
Well, let me pull out my PowerPoint. How much time do you have? So all of the things. So things such as not being able to access resources because you don't understand the language they're in. So we see this especially play out during COVID, especially when states and local governments aren't able or are unwilling to print out resources or have someone on the hotline be able to speak the language that you speak. And we can see that oftentimes whenever there's a natural disaster, and our communities are often the last ones that get to know any of the information. So things like language barriers, cultural stigmas. So all things domestic and sexual violence. It can be really, really difficult to talk about in our own communities. So we're trying to break some of those barriers. And if you wanted me to get into imperialism and all those other things, I can. But all I got to say is watch 90 Days Fiance, and you will probably see a lot of it play out in that show.
Well, that is certainly a popular one on Netflix these days. So, yeah, I think that it there are so many things that on the institutional level, agencies either just don't think about to do and or don't have the resources to do. And the language barrier is one of the number one things that happens, right? We always print things in English, um,
Hmm.
sometimes maybe Spanish, but beyond that, we have tons of people that speak Farsi, for example, here locally, and it's difficult for them to be able to get services. And, while the interpreters that you can have, the toll-free services and things are helpful, right? Those people still aren't trained in the services that you're providing and don't necessarily know the language right off the top of their head to be able to translate specific, concepts. So absolutely is a huge, huge thing that is happening institutionally.
Yeah. Usually, whenever people talk about language, there's also the culture aspect of growing up in the culture and knowing what to or what not to say, and what subjects to touch and what subjects not to touch, can make a huge difference. So, I always tell the story of how we had not one of our first, but one of the second or third Vietnamese clients that I've met. And she came in and she was not really able to tell her story to the advocate that she was speaking to. And it was nothing at fault with the advocate at all, but she knew that I think having someone that looked like her and grew up in the same kind of culture, and could speak a little bit of the language that she spoke, could really make a difference. So the advocate called me. I was able to come in and get parts of her story that other advocates weren't able to get. So representation not only matters, but I think it absolutely can save lives, especially in victim services.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're there to be able to help with that. And like I said, I can't say enough about what you're doing with the roundtable, and it's very overdue. So, all right. So, what would make the biggest difference for the people that you serve on the interpersonal and the systemic level? If you had to narrow it down.
Yes. I mean, I always love to talk about systemic things. So on a systemic level, resources. All of the resources that you could pour in, we are willing to take. So right now we are needing a lot more translators, especially for any and all Asian languages in Oklahoma. So just on an interpersonal level, if you know an Asian language, or you know a translator or an interpreter or someone who is willing to volunteer their time and energy, that is very, very much something that the roundtable or the task force is needing right now. On a systemic level, like I said, money, culturally conscious services, actually paying attention to communities and what they need instead of coming in and just saying, here is what you need, here's what we are going to give you, but actually coming in, listening to our concerns, and being able to provide resources from that.
So there's a theme across some of the other interviews that I've heard, and that is pretty much it, is a lack of resources and a lack of communicating those resources to communities of color. So you're absolutely spot on that. So it
Yes.
brings me to my next point in the show. So you have the opportunity to ask a question of those that are tuning in and or pose a challenge. So what would you say to those that are listening out there?
I would say, what are you continuously unlearning every single day? Are you in the process of either educating yourself, reading new books, or are you talking with your friends and families? Because it may not seem like you're making a difference, but being able to have those really difficult conversations with our own friends and family members, whether it comes to systemic racism, the current protests that are happening, or even domestic and sexual violence, and being able to talk about things that community members would rather push under the rug. So, starting those difficult conversations and unlearning things that have we've been learning our entire lives. So, it can be really difficult to have these conversations because oftentimes we're flipping the entire script that we've been taught our entire lives. So continuously unlearning, and if you are having difficult conversations, then I think you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, another theme is that a lot of people feel like just talking about it or having the right words to say is the right thing to do right now. And I think that we're past and beyond that, and it's time to start doing the really hard work of every single day trying to decolonize um,
Hmm.
and try to move beyond kind of the what we've learned and what we've been taught, regardless of what community you're in. Learning how to break those things down because there's always going to be something that you don't know about another community or about a systemic thing that's happening or a policy. So I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And usually it's people are gonna, sometimes they think that if they stop doing the bad thing or they stop saying the bad thing, it automatically makes them a great person or a good person. But it doesn't stop there. Just because you stop doing the bad thing doesn't make you a great person. You have to start doing good things every single day, to take action every single day, that even the smallest acts of solidarity matter.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're at our final question here. So, talked a lot of heavy stuff. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of need that still exists. So, tell us one experience that you have had that gives you the most hope that helps you continue to do this work and keep moving your one step in front of the other every single day.
Yeah, I had that one story of the client that I was able to help, and then just watching my own friends and neighbors come together for a cause that many of them aren't used to talking about. And like I said, small acts of solidarity matter. I have friends and families and coworkers in my lives that are ready to start the conversation with their own loved ones. So I think having a stepping stone there and having someone kind of come up to me and say, hey, I think I'm ready to start this conversation, I think is not only a step in the right direction, but it gives me so much hope. So, like I read somewhere, someone said that hope is a discipline. So having to continuously look for the silver lining in things, especially right now.
Yeah, that's definitely something a lot of us are having to do right now, and it's very difficult, but it does make a huge impact. So, again, thank you for what you're doing, and I'm so proud of everything that you have accomplished and everything that you're going to accomplish. Makes me very excited about the future of Oklahoma City. I'm going to give an opportunity for you to tell everyone that's listening how they can connect with the Asian Roundtable or offer resources or translation services or support in any way. So, how can they do that?
Yes. All they have to do is get in contact with me. My contact info is they can just go on the YWCAOKC.org website. And under trainings, I am under diversity inclusion trainings, and my contact is right on there. So give me a call or give me an email. I have a bad habit of answering emails at all times. And I'm more than willing to work with anybody and everybody to hopefully start to end domestic and sexual violence within Asian communities here.
Awesome. Well, we're going to also share that contact information at the end as well, but please everyone join in and thank Cindy for what she's doing, and send her some words of encouragement when you get the opportunity, and definitely support the work that she is doing there, because it's definitely needed. So thank you all for tuning in and for listening. I hope that you got some seeds of wisdom here on our short time together. And until next time, see you later.